RJ studied electrical engineering with a digital emphasis at the University of Utah for 3 years and started working with special students at local schools in and around Salt Lake City. He figured out that a lot of research and development people were working with materials for folks with severe disabilities, so he began researching and eventually developing materials at the responding to the requests of folks in the special education field, speech-language pathologists and other professionals that he was networking with. He moved to California in 1986, finished his Bachelor of Arts in Developmental Psychology, and continued his research, excuse me, this time at Dana Exceptional Needs Facilities in Dana Point. He also began writing a column for the internationally recognized publication Closing the Gap for 10 years. He received a master's in autism, curriculum and instructions from Arizona State University in 2015. So he is a continued learner, I'll say. He started and continues to make materials that are requested by others, many that know more about the person's needs than he does. He researches and develops materials in actual settings with actual people for professionals and parents that have shown a belief in his work. Trying to respond to our requests and keeping pace with ever-developing technologies has proven to be his greatest challenge. His company is based upon continued work of R.J. Cooper, creating, adapting, researching, assessing, and helping to implement special needs technology since 1983, before probably assistive technology was even a word or a phrase, okay? He is considered to be one of the pioneers in the field of AT. His 33 years of hands-on experience trying to fit technology to persons with any ability of any age allows him to come up with reasonably priced practical solutions. And we are thrilled to have him here today. I think we're going to see a lot of things that he can do, and he has a lot of products that are available that are so low priced and so effective with the folks that we serve. So let's give him a hand for coming all the way from California.
You were right, that was magnificent.
Well, it came right off your website. So.
I'm my own best advocate.
There you go. Hey, you got to toot your own horn.
Cables. There's one there. It's amazing how you can find cables and chargers these days, even at grocery stores. They're just everywhere. I went into a hardware store the other day and they had a whole variety of these things there. It's just amazing. Everywhere, they're everywhere. Look what Steve Jobs did from Apple. Just got us all doing these things. Let's do it there. And then here. That's a good sound. Okay, great. How many of you are speechies? I'll stand right about here now. One, only 2 speechies. How many are OTs? 1. Do we have a PT here today? Special ed teacher? How many of you are teachers? How many of you are parents of people with special needs? Well, who the heck are you people? The back row there, you all look like you're together. Where are you guys from?
We're behavior.
Really? Are you like behavior analysts, specialists? Like ABA type people?
Yeah.
Wow, we don't often run into a crowd of you hoodlums. Well,
We have service coordinators here that are advocates that manage people's caseloads.
Okay. Anybody else? Who else do we have here? We haven't mentioned. Vision specialist, music therapist, administrator, educational psychologist. Nobody? I guess we covered everybody. That's it here. Well, I'm a real ABA fanatic. However, it's a hard sell. And it's still a hard sell. Even after I tell people it's basically just counting. If you can count, you can be an ABA specialist. You're good. If you know the 4 major functions of behavior and you can count, we'll board certify you. How about that? You know, what is it, 2,000 hours to be board certified these days?
Yep.
It's amazing.
I just finished. I just have to take my boards.
Wow. That's a long time. How long did it take you to do it?
3 years.
That's a good chunk of your life right there.
Yeah.
That's fun though. But now you can you can make magic happen, we hope. Actually, I was online last night with a woman that didn't know anything about assistive tech, so she was coming up just completely from scratch. She was not a techie person, but she wanted an invulnerable iPad case because her son, who's 31, when he gets angry, really throws his iPad really hard. And she says they've broken a couple. So I told her about the case that I came up with, that I adapt. And she said, are you sure that's going to withstand a heavy throwing? And I told her, well, from the thousands that I've sold so far, no one has said that their iPad broke while it's in my case. However, it's not invulnerable, it's not indestructible. Somebody big enough and powerful enough probably could harm an iPad if they threw it hard enough at the wall. So the issue for me was not making the iPad invincible, but was dealing with the behavior. Well, it seemed like that was the first time that anybody had approached her on this. You could tell from her language. Yeah, from her language, you could tell that this was a new concept of, well, rather than make this invincible, why don't we work on somehow smoothing him down? So I asked her, so there are the 4 main functions, and I asked her, which one of these 4 do you think is responsible for his throwing behavior? And then I asked her, what would be possibly an antecedent? What happens right before this behavior? And then I stopped right there. I didn't want to go too far with her. So I'm impatiently awaiting those answers. I can't wait to find out here. But I think I'm on the right track. Would you agree? Yeah. But it's still a hard sell. But that's all ADHD is, right? That's it right there. You didn't need your 2,000 hours. You could have come here for 5 minutes and you'd be done. Well, I make light of people. I'm very informal. I own my own little company. I don't work for anybody. I work with hundreds and hundreds of school districts around the world. And people invite me in on their research teams. I'm doing 2 research projects with 2 major universities right now. So I'm still, thank goodness, knock on real wood here, still popular in my field of assistive tech. However, number one, I'm a guy. And there are definite differences between men and women. The biggest one that I find in these settings is my mouth. I'll say things, just like if you're married or you have boyfriends, we'll say things that just get us into trouble. It just happens. So take me with a grain of salt. Take me lighthearted. I'm very well-intentioned. I came all the way to California, from California, on my nickel here. This is my 3rd day. My first day was in Penn. My 2nd day was yesterday up in Buffalo. I'm doing 2 days here, all of my own expense at the gracious lodging of Manette right here. But this is thousands of dollars that I'm putting out to come here on your rainy little day here. And I'm bringing this whole dog and pony show here and working with your learners to try to make real differences. So cut me a little slack. Are there evaluations?
Oh, you mean at the end of the, yes.
There are. Mm-hmm. Cut me a little slack on your evals if I just misspeak. This happened 3 weeks ago in Washington. I was working with a teenage boy, very physically challenged. Now, I would bet that he's never had a hug from what we would call, what language are we going to use? A very attractive young lady.
Yes.
And then Manette immediately said, or we agreed, that's not the language that a teenage boy would ever use for an attractive young lady. He would say,
Hottie.
right. Well, I used the word babe, trying to connect with him so that when he touched a picture of a nice, attractive woman in the audience, she actually came up from the audience and gave him a hug, and he went wild. He was so happy. You could tell this was probably the first time that somebody came up and gave him a hug, just a really nice-looking young lady. And it was great. Well, I received an email just 2 nights ago that just nailed me on using the word babe when I was talking to him and saying, oh, if you touch that one, I bet maybe some babe from the audience will come up and give you a hug. Well, some people in the audience found that offensive. And in spite of all the good work all day that I did for 7.5 hours, that was it, the one word, and they were just completely focused on that. And sure enough, the person who emailed me said every single thing on their evaluation was negative.
Wow.
Everything, even of theirs, like the chairs were too hard, room is too cold type of thing. It was just everything. It just sort of set them off there. So please, take me with a grain of salt. I'm talking about things that I've created. There are other things that have been created for these populations, but I really focus on a very small, not a small population, but a small range of population that most people consider me really well versed in. And I really focus on the person up here, and I sort of tune you guys out for a minute. Once again, the male mouth. We just run at the mouth sometimes. So be nice to me. I came a long way up my own nickel here. Secondly, I'm an inventor. I'm a creator. I adapt things. These are all my things based upon need. Two needs. One is I'm working with somebody and I say to myself, I need X, Y, Z. Second need is you come to me and say, I have a student that, can you make, do you know of? That's the second need right there that I'll fulfill. So I fill in these little holes in the assistive tech marketplace that nobody else wants to either acknowledge or do. There are about, in my field, there's about 5 other companies that make some similar things. Not all of them, but a company here that makes arms, another company that makes apps, another company that makes cases. But it's a very small field. So my stuff is competing with some things there, but one of the things that I hate to see on the evals again is that I'm product oriented. All day I'm trying to sell you something. Well, I wouldn't be working with your learners. I wouldn't be able to work with your learners unless I could work with your learners. That's the only way it could happen. I will mention things that I make, but most of the time you'll have to raise your hand and ask me and say, what's that called? How much is it? Because I won't volunteer that information because I'm so sensitive about this subject and sitting on the vowels again. Out of a room full of 20 people right here, I think we'll be okay. But once we get up to 40, 50 people and above, there's going to be at least one person that either doesn't like me, hey, it just happens, or they see me as some type of used car salesperson. It just happens. It's just a numbers game. And for that person, I try to let it roll off my back there. But I'm Jewish. I was raised by a Jewish mom, so guilt. I have a built-in feature called guilt. And so I'll try to people please, but then after a while I can move on. But just on your evals, constructive criticism, people might call them negative comments, but I look at everything as constructive criticism. And now I'm sensitive. I won't use the word babe. I might whisper it in his ear. But I'll be very sensitive to that issue. But as far as the things I make, I feed my family based upon sales here. But I'm not product pushing. I use things because you've come to me and said you'd need them, or I'm working with somebody and I thought, oh, wouldn't it be great if I could X, Y, and Z? Everybody good on that? Okay, I want to really be clear on that.
So you don't have a problem for people to say, what does that cost? How much does it cost?
That's the only way you'll get it from me.
Okay.
Right. Now, at first, though, when I stop talking here, we're going to go around the room. You'll notice that there's things on the table. Would you be so kind? Right here. What's your first name?
Jennifer.
Jennifer, can you grab that and the yellow thing so that they're in front of you, so that I can have you do a little Vanna White of them in just a moment. And your first name?
Sue.
Sue, can you grab that? Right there. And if you see anything around you, any gadgets, like, what's your first name? I'm sorry?
Shannon.
Shannon, can you grab those puppies right there? Even though I put these things on tables, because I want to force assistive technology down your throats, people still don't pick them up. And they don't pick them up and go, what's this, RJ? They just sit there all day long unless I force you to understand that there are a variety of things to help a variety of people. But you're here, so I feel that I can make you learn. Or make you, the word, we can't even use it anymore because of people like Michael Jackson and Donald Trump these days. Expose. You're here to be exposed to assistive technology. You probably won't learn much. The learning begins when you get the things, take them back, and start using them. That's the learning. Here, I'm just exposing, I'm letting you see new things, and I'm hoping that one of these things, or the techniques I use, you'll walk out today and you'll go, well, he wasn't too bad. And that thing he used with Josie, that was pretty cool. Well, if you walked out with that right there, I'd be tickled pink. That would be fine for me. Any more information than that, it's just gravy. We'd be happy to do it. Otherwise, you've got to go to people like Minette. Minette, who are you to these people? Can they use you as a resource?
They use me for a resource. My title is Adaptive Equipment Coordinator. However, my expertise is more in the seating and mobility area and less in the technology area. But we also have an AT group, and so I have other people that are in that group that are more AT oriented. But if people need devices or equipment or whatever, I'll do research, try to find what they need. I'll price things out to get them the best deal. I know who we have purchasing relationships with. I have a huge inventory of different types of equipment and things like that. And so like they may call me and somebody's walker is broken and do I have a loaner, or, you know, all of those types of things. So I do that agency-wide. And I also assist people in the community as well.
Have you been in touch personally with everyone here?
Not with everyone, but with quite a few folks.
Okay.
I have a question.
Please.
I'm coming from Jamestown Schools. If we had a student that we thought could benefit from something that you might have in your inventory, are
You
we able
absolutely can contact me, yes. I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Local resource. Sometimes an alleged expert like me comes and we do good things and you're very impressed and everything works out great and I feel good about my day. A terrible thing happens when I walk out that door. Does anybody know what it is?
People just go
It's
on with
it's
their-
nothing. Nothing is the answer to that question. And we don't want that to happen. We want something to happen as a result of this session right here. So your question right there is basically saying, if I have a student that, ... that's exactly the type of question that we love hearing. That gets our attention. If you say to me, though, hey, RJ, what's that thing called? Not that important to me. But I have a student that, boy, that's a big one to me. So you should definitely link up, have Manette's email at least before you leave today, so that you have a local resource that's sort of like me, but her. And the phrase assistive technology is not just the gadgets. They are considered wheelchairs, canes, ways to turn on lights. We talked about an assistive technology thing. Was it yesterday? Yeah, it was yesterday. One of my 8 learners had a right hand that didn't work like yours or mine. 17-year-old girl, just a sweetheart. You wouldn't even know she had a disability, but she had LD, and she had a right hand that didn't work that well. And she, on the form, one of the questions I ask on these forms, did I ever get those?
I have some
Okay.
information.
On these forms that I get, just light information about them. One of the questions is, what is it you'd like to do that you're not doing now? Or for a child that can't express that, what is it you'd like Johnny to do that he can't do now? Well, this young lady, it was just yesterday. Can't remember her name. Ooh, I hate getting old. Anyway, she could not open like a ketchup bottle. That's what she decided was most important to her. She couldn't open things like a Pepsi bottle because of her right hand. And so the assistive technology thing that we came up with, well, the audience came up with some gadgets first. You know, things that you had to fit on correctly and then hold them. And then there's like a ratchet type of thing, a locking thing. But we all decided the best thing was this very thin sheet of rubberized material that's in the shape of a disc. Does anybody ever use these to open things?
Yes.
It's like Dyson, but it's even better than Dyson for opening things. And it lets you open jars and Pepsi things. And so I put a tissue in her hand, and I just said, well, just close your hand. Try to grab the tissue. And sure enough, she was able just to close her hand evenly, which would be what's necessary in order to operate the $1 rubberized thing there. And everybody decided that was better than any type of gadget that we found on the internet for opening things. And that would be an assistive technology item. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
So this is a great resource for you to have locally. How many of you are using iPads with people with disabilities right now? Is anyone in here doing it? So, a few of you. Good for you guys. Great. And you also. Good for you. How many of you are using computers in some therapeutic sense with someone right now? 1, 2. Same people, basically. Not Microsoft Word for you keeping record keeping, but you're using it with a program that's designed for somebody that needs it. That's what I'm asking. Okay, good. And the rest of you, you're really not using high technology with people with behavior disorders.
We have Dynavox users.
Oh, how many people are using augmented communication devices? About half. Okay. So in April of 2010, Steve Jobs introduced us to the iPad. The iPad quickly took over not only the AAC market, replacing Dynavoxes and things, but the whole special needs market. Everybody went iPad crazy over that summer, and they still are. it's still on the increase. The Galaxies, the Androids, the Samsungs haven't made much penetration into these markets.
Is that because of the
Chromebooks,
is that because of a lack of accessibility?
well, actually, I'm going to
features?
explain that right now.
Okay,
You're just one step ahead of me.
sorry.
That's okay, but it's a good question. That's sort of a chicken and egg question.
Yeah.
Did the accessibility come first, making the iPad popular, or did they put it in because it was popular and they said, let's do this for accessibility? I don't know what Steve's motivation was, but accessibility has been a thing for Apple since the Macintosh, even in the early days. I don't know who we have to thank for that. Chromebooks hasn't made any penetration in our markets. You see Chromebooks in library settings. You can even check out Chromebooks. But as far as things available for Chromebooks in our field, small developers like me, of which 95% of the vendors, of the people who make things in our field of assistive technology, are little mom and pop organizations like me. They don't have the resources to make things for everything and then have you pick and choose. We have to choose to make things for that which you already have or are getting, and that means iPads. So we're going to devote all of our resources towards iPads and zero of our resources towards Androids, Chromebooks, and these days even Windows, because Windows 10, ugh. Windows 8, yuck. Most people who have Windows 7 keep Windows 7. They're not going to change it because Windows 7 is beautiful, it works. But now when you buy a tablet, a Windows tablet like a Surface Pro or a Dell or something of that nature from Best Buy, do you have Best Buys around here anywhere?
We do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can go there, and there are about 4 or 5 different brands of tablets that are the iPad size, but they're running full Windows on it, and the battery life is good, and they're nice little tablets, but they're not coming back. Windows is not making a resurgence into the special needs market as far as using it with people with disabilities. Maybe for record keeping, but I rarely run into people using Windows tablets. And then there's the old dinosaurs of the Dynavoxes, the Prentke Romich devices. They're still out there, and they're still way overpriced. I was talking to somebody on the phone the other day that just said they just got a Medicaid Tobii Dynavox device. They paid a little over $19,000 for an AAC device. Yeah, it had eye gaze built into it, but geez, that's just ridiculous.
Or
So,
in New York State, have they started funding iPads for communication devices yet or no? That you know of?
Not that I know of, no.
some states are.
They want to dedicate, what they want is they want the iPad dedicated only for the speech. God forbid anybody gets on and surfs the internet, but so we'll spend $19,000 instead of $500.
Right, and
Plus
we're
the
paying out of
software.
pocket. You and I are paying for those devices. And a lot of times, the learners like at the cause and effect level. And they're doing an eye gaze computer for $13,000, $10,000, $6,000, whatever it is. As compared with from about $1,000 with an iPad, you're basically done with your hardware.
Well, the Pro Slate device is basically an iPad, and that was
That is
through
being
Medicaid funding.
That's
But
nice. And those are only running like $2,000 or $3,000.
7,500.
Oh, ouch, still. I don't know what they're thinking. But they're nice. And most of the devices, even by Tobii Dynavox or PRC, not most, but I'd say half, are basically just tablets. They're running Windows, and they're running their own communication software on them, either in locked mode, so you are stuck in their program, and you have to pay them from $150 to $450 to unlock it to get access to surfing the internet. Or they're their own dedicated boxes that run something else, and they only can do their communication. So it's not running regular Windows at all. It's something else that they're very tight-lipped about. These companies, Tobii, Dynavox, Tobii bought Dynavox, and there's about 5 of these companies here that have been very competitive over the years. The companies themselves are good companies. They make great products. Their products, though, are expensive and they go down a lot. And when they go down, sometimes they never come back up, either because you didn't get the funding for a new battery or it wasn't appropriate for the learner. They call that device abandonment. And there have been studies on device abandonment. The number one reason in April of 2010, or that summer, was the iPad. People, especially parents in droves, put the Dynavox aside and just parents started writing their own apps for the iPad for communication. After that, parents started hiring programmers to make apps for communication. And then the bigger companies came along, like Dynavox, and made Compass. Prentke Romich came out with Lamp. Trying to think of the other ones here. Compass and Lamp. I think those are the big ones. PRC and Dynavox.
Monroe Wheelchair.
I'm sorry?
Monroe Wheelchair.
Monroe Wheelchair. I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Well, they work.
Do they make an app?
They actually are a vendor, but
Okay.
FRS made the Pro Slate.
Okay. And they make their own software for the Pro Slate that makes the Pro Slate talk.
Yeah.
Okay. So they quickly, what I was referring to was the big boys, the people who make the Dynavoxes, they also realized that the iPad was here to stay after a couple of years, and they made their own apps that basically turn an iPad into their higher-end machine. That's what I was trying to get at. So even the big boys realize that the iPad has become the tool. They'll go to the old dinosaurs. Well, they're not old anymore. They made new versions of the old dinosaurs. But they will go to these dedicated devices costing literally thousands upon thousands of dollars because they're really fixed on getting it, quote unquote, for free through some type of funding issue. And they're willing to wait up to like a year to get the device. Or somebody has just put the bug in their ear that they must have this device. And sometimes even in rural situations where speechies are not, who's the speechie here? You guys. Speechies may not have full exposure to a wide range of product because you might not have gone to, well, you've gone to ASHA, I'm sure, at least once. Have you ever gone to a Closing the Gap? Do you even know what that is? An ATIA? These are like ASHAs, but for the field of assistive technology. ATIA.org is in January in each Orlando. In Orlando each January. And then ClosingTheGap.com is in Minneapolis each October. These are the two major events in my field of assistive technology. So all the vendors of these boxes are there. ASHA, they're just a small piece of the pie at ASHA. ASHA is so huge that the communication companies like Tobii Dynavox aren't that big a deal there because there's just so many other things at ASHA. At the smaller assistive tech conferences, though, they are. You're really seeing just the AAC devices and the gadgets right there. So one of those would be really nice. Consider this sort of almost like a mini version of that, a real mini version. Do you have a Tech Act little conference for assistive technology in New York?
They do. They have an AT. They do an AT conference in Buffalo, usually once a year. That's organized by some vendors as well as people incorporated.
Do any of the AAC vendors or the app developers come to that?
I know that the last time that I went, I know that Dynavox was there.
Okay, there's
yeah,
something.
they were up there.
So this actually bolsters my case. If you went to that particular thing, you'd be introduced or you'd get more information about a Dynavox, and you might bring that back to your offices, and you'd recommend that because you've seen that. That happens a lot. But there are many other things out there. Being in it, would you consider this a rural area?
Yes.
Being in a rural area in New York, you don't have real access to high-tech areas. Would that be a true statement without being offensive?
Yeah.
See, now I'm overly sensitive. So the moral here is that there's other things besides just what you've been exposed to. And you've got to dig a little, maybe to find the quote-unquote best thing. But in my opinion, the best thing are not the big boys anymore. It's an iPad. I'm all about the iPad. It's just so
and there's free apps that there are out there that function perfectly well for people.
To make these things talk as somebody's voice, there are a little over 200 different apps you can choose from, with some of them even being free. The better ones, of course, cost more money. But some of them are even free. But most of them are well less than the cost of an actual Tobii Dynavox device. We can all agree on that. Okay. We're going to take the next, oh God.
Well, does that device have the same function as the IMAX does?
What's an IMAX?
The,
Oh, you mean eye gaze? No.
Oh, yeah, the eye gaze.
That's a very good question. There are limitations to the iPad, even though it's wonderful on so many levels. One of the limitations that Steve Jobs put in was it can't do things for you, what we call technology-wise, in the background. Now, in the background means, the best example of in the background would be a virus. When you get a computer virus on your PC, it's a program, set of instructions, that's running in the background, you can't see it, doing bad things. Everybody got it? That's a virus. It's that simple. That's also the definition of what we call a software driver. Is anybody in here familiar with that term, software driver? A software driver is for your PC or your Mac, and it lets one piece of hardware communicate with another. But in order for these two things to communicate, it needs instructions, a program to communicate. That type of program is called a driver because it lets the PC drive a USB drive or drive an iMacs, which would be, not that one, there are others though. These days, the eye gaze technology is reduced down to a bar about this wide, about that high, and about that thick, and it plugs into the USB port. Very portable, very attachable to different places, and pretty effective. But it needs a software driver in order for it to work, because it's not magic. You can't just plug it in and it starts tracking your eyes. It needs specific instructions, okay? Well, when Steve Jobs came up with the iPad and the iPhone, you'll notice that there's no viruses ever spoken about for these devices. Nobody has ever gotten a virus on their iPhone or on their iPad. That's because Steve at Apple, the owner at that time, or president actually, said we're not going to allow anything to run in the background. Only things that Apple does can run in the background. We're not going to let anybody else. And that means no viruses because there is no background on an iPad. Everybody with me? There's no programs that can run on it because he said so. But that also eliminated things like the iMacs or a joystick or head tracking from being able to control the iPad.
Because that has to run in the background.
Because it has to have the software running in the background for the two to communicate. There are a few things we can use, but they're definitely reduced in number by this restriction by Steve. But the benefit is we never have to worry about our iPad getting a virus. Does that answer that question?
Excellent.
Okay. It's good to know that. Most people never think of virus when they're thinking of people with disabilities, but yet that's the real bottom line. Time. Oh, good, right here. Okay. Whew. I'll do this just a few minutes. We'll take just a few minutes here. We'll do the short version. There are some things around here that have been invented from need, and I'm just going to quickly, just not even tell you prices. I'm just going to tell you what they are, and then we're going to move along. Because I find even when putting them right in front of you, nobody picks it up and goes, "What's this?" I don't know why. So if you would please pick that up right there, that thing, and just hold it up for everybody to see. This is a Bluetooth music box. I'm sorry, no, that's an MP3 music box. MP3s are music files. That's all they are. They're like a Word document, only instead of words, they have music in them. And they have MP3 at the end. This box plays MP3 music all by itself. So we can do it with buttons. It's got play and pause, and then next song, previous song, and then it has a nice little speaker built in. And inside the box is an MP3 player. On the back, that one's not modified, but we also can put switch inputs on there so that they'd be right here. Normally, we can put switch inputs on there so that someone that can only move a toe or wiggle a finger or something could play their own music. Because obviously, they themselves could not operate an iPod cognitively and or physically. Okay, next one. Just pick it up and hold it there. That's my Bluetooth dual button box. That's a way for somebody that can either hit buttons or click switches to operate some aspects of the iPad. Not all of it, but some aspects of the iPad. Next.
For example,
The easiest one would be what we call step scanning. If they're in a communication program, an app, and there's a grid of picture on the screens to say different things, we can use one button to step through, moving a highlighter to step through each choice, and then we can use the green button to select to say, I want to say that thing.
so if the picture is, I need to use the bathroom, they would scan through with the one button, and then they would hit the second button
To say.
and it would verbalize, I need to use the bathroom.
Exactly. Thank you. That's called step scanning. You can hold that one up there. This is my cause and effect. Oh, I'm sorry, Dan. This is my cause and effect music box. It's similar to the MP3, except this one's for cause and effect. We hit the button or click the switch. The music will play for a certain amount of time that you can control. It stops. Their job is to figure it out and make it happen again. So obviously this is for an early level learner, and the other one would be for a higher level learner. You guys have anything in front of you? Good. That's my mouse button box. That's an alternative to a mouse on a PC or a Mac. Good. Next one to your right there. That's my flopper stopper for head floppers. People who have their head down all the time. I found that this 90 degrees right here Gravity is the issue. Once I eliminate gravity by not letting the head drop below that, no, they don't just rest on the switch. Click the switch right in the center. Yeah, just click it a few times so they can hear it go. It should be making a popping sound every
Oh, I
time.
got it.
There you go.
Is that to use to have a switch control? Like
Yeah, that's for switch control, except we know they can flop because they're a head flopper, and they don't just lay on the switch. It's almost like that has magical properties. Their head is up, and they get this great head control just because they're not fighting gravity on this 90 degrees right here. Works like a charm sometimes. If you would, please. Reach on over there. This is my Bluetooth keyboard. Notice the colored rows. In all these years, nobody else has come up with colored rows, and yet it's the bomb. You could say
it this way so we can see over here as well.
So you could say, we're looking for the T, and you can whisper, it's on the blue row, and that's much better than either you pointing it out or having them have all the colors the same and they can't find it. Or some of the keyboards have bunches of colors, like the vowels are certain colors, and then these function keys are other colors. This really works. That's my Bluetooth Super Switch. That actually has electronics inside of it, so it can communicate directly with an iPad to do certain things.
Henry wants.
Next one. That's good. The next one right here. This is my mini arm with developmental psychology as my first degree. Less is more is a very famous psychological expression. So the less hardware we have, in my opinion, the better off everybody is. Now, as you can see, this mini arm is much shorter than other arms that you might have seen like it. So I like to position one behind their shoulder on the wheelchair, come over the shoulder, and end up at their cheek. That's my favorite way to use that. Sometimes, though, I'll attach it near their knee and come up where they can get it with their hand. But it's mini. It's one of the only ones that's really small on the market. That's my voiceover controller. Remember before we talked about that there are only a few things that can operate an iPad because of this restriction about the viruses. This is one that actually can serve a purpose between touching it directly and using just a big giant single switch like we saw with the yellow one.
So you use
This
that
is sort
to
of-
select the app that you want to open?
It can.
Okay.
Yeah, it's for doing different, well, we can talk about it more a little later, but it's basically a different method of control for an iPad that wouldn't be available. It's a clever way of getting in between whacking a big yellow button like that one we just saw and touching the screen directly. I mean, there's a lot of territory in between those two things, right? This is in between. Anything else on there? Okay, how about on the, oh yes, that's a trough. And that screws into the end of one of my arms to provide elbow and forearm support so they can do other things. So this is an example of me making something based upon need. And I did it for one person, and I do it for other people. If I can do it for free, great. Sometimes I've got to charge for it. But whatever it takes to get somebody cranking, going, moving, I'm going to do it. Anything in the back row? I don't think so. Beautiful. So we're going to break for just until 10 o'clock, I think. And then our learners are going to come up, and hopefully you'll enjoy today as I work with your learners, sight unseen, nothing up my sleeves, even strong behavior situations, very familiar with, no matter what our level of autism or ASD would be. Usually I can handle it, and we get something good out of it. I ask for you two things when you return. Got to be pretty quiet in here. It's a very bouncy room. That's why I don't need a microphone. But your whispers and comments to each other, that will quickly distract our learner. Second thing is I have to ask you for your positive energy. I've read you the riot act about what I might say. So if that offends you, then I'm not afraid to say it. Nobody tells me what to do. There's the door. It's marked with a big exit sign. And I take no offense at that. But your positive energy. You come back here, and who's our first learner?
An individual named Alan.
Alan.
He's not here yet.
That's okay. Alan, when we come back here, you're going to be thinking, Alan's going to do great things this morning. I don't care what you think about me, but I want you to come back positive about Alan. Fair? Okay, we'll see you in 10.